Hello again, everybody. This is Rocket Rick J18, and today I thought we'd take a look at my 1960 Tops set and just see what the cards look like. It's been a while since I looked at it, and I thought that since I'm going to be showing cards from the 1960 Tops set, it was only appropriate that I would wear uh, Skaght Reindeer Studios T-shirt that commemorates the 1960 top set. At least I think that's why he put 1960 on it. I'm pretty sure. Well, thanks, Scott, and let's go ahead and turn down the camera and cards. There we go. So it's a little difficult to know how to put these cards in. So I elected to put them in these 9 pockets uh, so that when you turned them over, you would see, number one in the top left, and then two and three across the top, four, five, and six. More or less just like you would if they were vertical cards. But of course they're not. And if you do that, for some reason, Tops wants to display uh, these cards upside down. So anyway, um, so that's the reason for that. So Master and Mentor, obviously that's a combo card. Willie Mays and Bill Rigney. Uh, this would be Bill Rigney's next to last year managing the Giants. Uh, Alvin Dark would take over that role in '62, and and then he would lead the Giants to the pennant, obviously. So we got 20 game winner early win from 1959. The Go-Go Sox. So he was be a big part of that pitching staff that won the American League pennant that year. And Faye Throneberry, of course, is the brother of Marvelous Marv Throneberry, who toiled for Mookie's beloved New York Mets. Joe Adcock hit 4 home runs in a game once, and looked like he was going to be a great slugger for the Braves, but his career didn't last too terribly long in that, and nor was it very distinguished. He also hit one of the only balls that I'm aware of that went over the fence in dead center in the Polo Grounds over 480 feet. So that's next. We've got several pretty good players there. Ernie Banks, obviously Hall of Famer. Ernie Broglio, involved in a trade for Lou Brock. And Johnny Callison, also with the White Sox, traded to the Phillies for the 1960 season. Jim Mudcat Grant with the Cleveland Indians pitched for the Twins when they won the pennant in 1965, I believe. So Milt Pappas would later be in the infamous trade uh, between Baltimore and Cincinnati that saw Frank Robinson go to the Orioles chiefly for this guy, Bill Pappas. Next, we have former Rookie of the Year Roy Sievers, Rocky Bridges. Doesn't look like a shortstop, does he? Well, he was. Eddie Fisher gave up, what was it, Roger Maris's 60th home run? That's right. 1961. Elroy Face went 18-1. Let's see, for the 58 or 59, 57. Is that right? No, 1959. He was 18-1, which is still the lowest one-loss record in Major League record as far as percentages. Yeah, percentage. Well, here's next is Brooks Robinson, then sophomore stalwarts Vada Pinson and Jim O'Toole, Whitey Ford for the Yankees, Tito Francona for the Cleveland Indians. Next, we got Joe Cunningham, St. Louis Cardinals first baseman, Billy Bruton, Milwaukee Braves left fielder, Roy McMillan, shortstop for the Reds, Earl Averill for the Chicago Cubs, Dave Philly. I want to say it's Jack Fisher again. No, that's Eddie Fisher. So I might be confusing Jack Fisher and Eddie Fisher. I probably am, so forgive me for that. Al Kaline, Hall of Famer. Don Zimmer, Hall of Famer. Not as a player, however. And I'm pretty sure Zimmer's a Hall of Famer. I could be mistaken about that. Gino Simoli, Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder. He and Bill Mazeroski were on the 1960 Pirates. Of course, Maz hit the famous home run. Gus Triandos, catcher for Baltimore. Roger Craig, a 20-game winner, a 20-game loser, I should start to say, for the hapless New York Mets. He might have been involved in the trade that sent Duke Snyder and Gil Hodges to the New York Mets. There's Lou Burdett, hero of the 1957 world champion Milwaukee Braves. He's from my neck of the woods, Nitro, West Virginia. And next is Jose Pagan, shortstop for the San Francisco Giants. And Elston Howard for the 1960 New York Yankees. And we've got another Fisher, Bill Fisher this time. Didn't know how to spell his name properly. Walt Drapo is a Red Sox Rookie of the Year, I believe. There's Bob Gibson, a nice looking card there. Johnny Antonelli, left-handed pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. And Vic Power, Big Power was on the Indians. He got traded to the Minnesota Twins, where I saw him play as a 9-year-old. And Johnny Roseboro, who later involved in the famous altercation with Juan Marichal. It's it's one of those things that says never take a knife to a gunfight. Roseboro threw the ball what he thought was it is to say, what Roseboro thought that the ball came too close to his ear for comfort, and wanted to counteract that by swinging a baseball bat at Roseboro. Bobby Avila, one of the two Hal Smiths, and Tony Kubek, shortstop for the New York Yankees. There's the original Frank Thomas. Lenny Green, who pictured here with the Washington Senators in 1961, or I should say 1962, he was picked up by the not by the Washington Senators. The Senators moved to Minneapolis and became the Minnesota Twins. Here's Ralph Terry. Ralph Terry was known as the GOAT in the 1960 World Series because he threw the ball that Nazarowski hit over the fence to win the game and the World Series in Game 7. So we got the Hall of Famer Nellie Fox next, and not too much else. Carl Willey, I think, is another guy who sometimes can look like he has incredibly big ears. Relief pitchers Elroy Face and Hoyt Wilhelm, fork and knuckler. There's Clete Boyer, brother of Ken Boyer. Bob Skinner. Bob Prince used to have a somewhat off-color comment to make whenever Skinner would have to go back to the left field fence to haul in a fly ball. I won't say what it is, but I'll leave it to your imagination. Cal McClish. Any Pirate fans out there who remembers that, maybe you can let people know. There's Vic Wertz, hit the ball that Mays made famous in the 1954 World Series. There's Chico Cardenas, who was a utility infielder for the Reds and was the author of the famous statement when he had to play several games in a row. He said, "Bench me or trade me." That's a true story, or it was told for true anyway. Darren Johnson was I think he was a Rookie of the Year for the Yankees at one point in time. And there's Frank Howard, not a Hall of Famer, but certainly as scary a hitter as perhaps anybody. There's somebody who is a Hall of Famer, and that's Jim Kaat, 1960. That's hard to believe. Again, I was fortunate enough to see Jim Kaat pitch a 5-0 shutout in that same game Lenny Green appeared in, 1962. And here's Art Mahaffey. He was one of the guys who was involved in the collapse of the 1964 World Series when Mock thought you couldn't pitch anybody in the last 12 games except for Chris Short and Jim Bunning. There's a Hall of Famer, Carl Yastrzemski. Billy Pierce, left-handed pitcher for the White Sox. Shot heard around the world, Bobby Thompson. There's Jim Davenport, the third baseman for the 62 Giants. Rocky Nelson, one of two first basemen for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he had a 3-run homer for the Pirates in the 1960 World Series. But nobody remembers that because the Pirates lost. Or Pirates won, but they didn't win on his home run. There's Wes Covington, a very good outfielder for the Milwaukee Braves and then the Philadelphia Phillies, another guy that was on that 64 Phillies team. There's Jim Pearsall, author of the book Fear Strikes Out, about his problems with mental health. And of course, there's rival all-stars Mickey Mantle and Ken Boyer, who faced off in the 1964 World Series. Jack Sanford was the big winner in the 1962 for the 1962 Giants, and pitched in I believe 3 games in 1962. I think he did. I know he pitched in at least 2 of them. Hector Lopez, the 4th outfielder for the Yankees. Pedro Ramos, Cuban-born pitcher for the Washington Senators. Veda Pinson, a lot of people think he ought to be in the Hall of Fame. A lot of people think Billy Martin should be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe for just putting up with George Steinbrenner. There's Dick Williams. He's in the Hall of Fame, not as a player, but as a manager. Managed the 1967 Boston Red Sox and then the 1972 Oakland Athletics. But 1960, he was a infielder, outfielder with the Kansas City Athletics. There's Gene Woodley, who was the Yankees left fielder until he shipped off to Baltimore. There's my brother-in-law, Bobby Gene Smith. He's not really my brother-in-law, but my brother-in-law is Bobby Gene Smith. His given name is Bobby Gene Smith. Jerry Lynch, I think he must have been traded several times between the Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Lindy McDaniel, Johnny Clipstein, he became a relief pitcher for the Phillies in 1963 or so, something like that. Of course, there's Hall of Famer Willie Mays. And Ryan Durham, It's hard to believe that he wore sunglasses. He couldn't see. He was blind as a bat. Very nearsighted, at least, at the very least. Here's among the earliest manager cards, which are vertically oriented, unlike the rest of the cards and most of the rest of the cards in the set. Joe Gordon's in there, Jimmy Dykes, manager for Detroit, Chuck Dressen, the Milwaukee manager, who was a replacement, well, not a replacement. Walter Olson, the guy next to him, was a replacement for Chuck Dressen, 1955. Fred Hutchinson, who sadly, my only memory of Fred Hutchinson was that he died of cancer while he was still manager of the Reds. Cookie Lavagetto, 1947. He's the guy that got the hit off of Bill Bevins to break up Bevins' no-hitter in the ninth inning. And he later scored the tying run. And when in the game, the Yankees won the World Series, but they lost that game that Bill Bevins had a perfect, or not a perfect game, a no-hitter going. So Danny Murtaugh, a lot of people think he ought to be in the Hall of Fame as a manager. Al Lopez, I believe, is in the Hall of Fame as a manager. There's Bill Rigney. We've already talked about him. Paul Richards later became the general manager, I believe, for the Phillies. Eddie Sawyer, manager of the Phillies in 1960. Casey Stengel, manager of the Yankees in 1960. 1963, he was fired, or 1962, at the end of the 62 season, he was fired. No, that's not true. Yeah, he was fired. That's right. In the 60 season, he was fired. In 1962, he became the manager for the 1960. He was named manager for the 1963 New York Mets for their inaugural season. Lou Burdett, Warren Spahn, and Bob Buell. They're the mound magicians. And always like this guy here, Don Demeter. Forgot to turn these cards back this way. There's Gus Bell, father of Bobby Bell. Pretty good outfielder for the Reds. Luis Aparicio, Hall of Fame shortstop for the White Sox. Stan Musial, Hall of Fame outfielder, first baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals. Let's see what his stat line was after 1959. Get this one. Okay. Hits, 3,203 hits, 412 home runs, 1,678 RBIs, and he had a 255 batting average in 1960, but his lifetime batting average was still 337. Certainly, those are Hall of Fame numbers, no question about it. Power Plus, Rocky Colavito, Tito Francona. There's the National League MVP, Dick Groat, won the batting crown. A lot of people thought that probably should have gone to Roberto Clemente. Roberto himself said, hey, Dick Groat had a great season. He was the MVP. My objection was being named, was being voted as the sixth best player for the MVP award. Junior Jim Gilliam. He was originally the guy who came up and took over at second base for the Dodgers when they were in Brooklyn. And by 1960, they had moved him to third base. There's Hank Bauer, had been the a right fielder for the Yankees when took over for Charlie Keller when he retired. Got traded to the Athletics. Bob Turley, hero of the 1958 World Series. I believe he won 2 games in that World Series. Robin Roberts, Hall of Famer, just being a 300-game winner. I think he had, I want to say 288 time his career ended. There's Curt Flood. A lot of people think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think probably anybody who's watched my video on the 1959 set knows that Curt Flood was on my very first baseball card. There's Chuck Tanner, later became manager of the Oakland Athletics, and then in I think the only player traded or active player traded for a manager was when the Pirates sent Manny Sanguillen to the Athletics for a short time in order to get Chuck Tanner to be their manager. But they almost, very shortly thereafter, he got Sanguillen back, and glad they did. There's Johnny Blanchard, the backup catcher for Yogi Berra, and also Elson Howard. Philippe Alou, one of the Alou brothers. So you probably heard the joke about the 4 Alou brothers. The 3 of them appeared at one time in the San Francisco Giants outfielder, Philippe, Matty, and Jesus. And the 4th outfielder appeared in a couple of World Series with the Orioles, Boogaloo. Pretty bad joke. Joe Nuxall, youngest player ever to play in the major leagues at age 15 during war years. He had probably lost out on being a rookie of the year, because, he was so young. Hall of Famer Gil Hodges. I think I've told this before. Gene Conley's is the answer to the trivia question. Who's the only major league player to win 3 NBA championships and a World Series? He was on the 57 Braves when he got his World Series win. He was on the Boston Celtics before that. So uh, there's Tony Taylor, got traded to the Phillies and was a stalwart second baseman for the Phillies. Hall of Famer Richie Ashburn, Hall of Famer Hank Aaron. Those other guys all played in the major leagues, and I didn't, so I'm not going to say anything bad about them. Frank Malzone was a all-star third baseman. I believe he was an all-star. I mean, he was definitely a very good third baseman. Not probably no Brooks Robinson, but then who is? Bobby Shantz was MVP for the Giants back in the day. Charlie Lau became a batting coach later for the Kansas City Royals, and was the guy that helped George Brett become the hitter that he was. The hitter that Charlie Lau never was, but he also had some pretty great quotes about Brett's hitting prowess. He once said Brett could hit buckshot with barbed wire. That's a pretty tall task there, I can assure you. Johnny Romano was a pretty highly regarded catcher for the Indians during the 60s. Willie McCovey, of course, obviously a Hall of Famer. Jim Perry, brother of Hall of Famer Gaylord Perry. Hall of Famer Bob Clemente, Roberto Clemente. Harvey Keene, traded to the Detroit Tigers for Rocky Colavito. Ray Sadecki later became traded to the San Francisco Giants. Earl Batty, White Sox catcher, again was traded to the Minnesota Twins. Red Schoendienst, Hall of Famer. Harvey Haddix pitched 12 innings of perfect baseball. 36 up, 36 down before giving up a hit. There's Hall of Famer Sandy Koufax with the 1960 Los Angeles Dodgers. There's Mickey Mantle, and here's another Mickey Mantle. And if you know the story about this card, you'll know that I gave this card to Mickey Mantle to sign it, which he did. And then at the Atlantic City, no, not at Atlantic City, I guess at, I think in Chicago, I got it encapsulated. And they gave the auto a 7 and the card a 2, but nevertheless, better centering on this one. Don Newcomb, Rookie of the Year. that's my two Mickey Mantles. Bill White. Went from the Giants over to the Cardinals in 1959. There's Gus Bell, Frank Robinson, Jerry Lynch. We already talked about these two guys. But that guy was, if you had five major league hitters on Mount Rushmore, then I can see for a fact Frank Robinson would have been easily been the fifth, and could have been the fourth, the first, second, third, or fourth, depending on how you rated him. Herb Score suffered a very severe injury with the A's. Don Larson, of course, pitched a perfect game in the 1956 World Series. Bill White became a National League president. Minnie Minoso, Hall of Famer. Dallas Green, his best quote was, and he by the way, he's from Newcastle County, Delaware, became a Phillies manager, New York Yankees manager, et cetera, et cetera. Junior Stevens. Anyway, Dallas Green told people, he said, I don't know why people complain about I was a 20-game winner. And sure enough, if you look on one of his later baseball cards, you'll see that he did win 20 games, but it took him 7 years to do it. Don Hope, answer to that famous trivia question, who played third base for the 1960 World Series winning Pittsburgh Pirates? It was in a light beer commercial, I think. Don Hope. They all got it right, except for the wife. She didn't know that. Bill Skowron, great first baseman for the New York Yankees. Roger Maris. I think more as we get further and further removed from what Roger Maris did in 1961, the more and more people think that he ought to be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm one of them, so, absolutely. Dale Long, once, I believe he hit in eight consecutive games, hit a home run, a record that was later tied by Donnie Baseball. Bob Buell once, was a starting pitcher for the Milwaukee Braves, and he came up new numbers of times during the season and failed to get a hit in the entire season. So I think it's pretty amazing. Leon Daddy Wags, Cardinals, later with the Los Angeles Angels, I guess, really. So this is game one, which the Sox won going away, 11-0. Game two, Charlie Neal hit 2 home runs, and the Dodgers won game 2 4-3. 1950, game 3 was won by the Dodgers 3-1. Game 4 was won by the Dodgers 5-4. Gil Hodges hitting the game winner. Luis Aparicio stole second base in this game, and the Sox won it 1-0. But they came back to beat, or the Dodgers came back to beat the Sox in Game 6 by a score of 9-3, and that's the champs celebrate. In 1961, it was changed to the winners celebrate. Wade Wilhelm, Hall of Famer. Smokey Burgess, not a Hall of Famer, but pretty damn good, nevertheless. Great pinch hitter. Cleveland Indians Rocky Colavito. New York Yankees Bobby Richardson. Milt Pappas, Eddie Fisher, and Jerry Walker. That's who Walker is. Mike Cuellar went in to find fame and fortune as a left-hander in the pitching rotation for the Baltimore Orioles when they had 4 20-game winners in the same year. Pretty damn good. Sad Sam Jones, Gary Peters, Carl Furillo, the Reading Rifle, Bob Serve, another big hitting outfielder in the Pirate or the Yankee organization for a while. Don Mossy, I think we all know Don Mossy. George Crowe was very instrumental in helping young Bob Gibson get acclimated to pitching in the major league as a black player. No easy task. Eddie Matthews, Hall of Famer. Pete Wisenant, Cincinnati Reds outfielder. Johnny Padres, hero of the 1955 World Series, winner of Game 7. Chuck Stobbs, very famous, 1953, gave up the longest home run recorded. Whether you believe that or not, it's hard to tell. Nellie Fox and Harvey Keene. Well, I've got 2 card number 432s. I'm going to have to fix that. I guess we're going to have to take one of these out. Probably ought to be this one since it's really miscut. This one's off center, but at least it's not miscut. And I'll have to go back through. I'm not going to fix all of these, but I'll at least get that one squared away. There's Marvelous Marv Throneberry. Bob Friend, really top pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates along with Vern Law. Jim Gentile, 1961, hit 5 Grand Slam home runs for the Baltimore Orioles, and he's on the 1963 league leaders card with 1962 league leaders card with Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. Warren Spahn won 363 games, the winningest left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball history. At least he was with my outdated baseball encyclopedia. Vern Law, we already talked about him. Orlando Cepeda, Hall of Famer with the St. Louis Cardinals. Kurt Simmons, later traded to the Cardinals. And here's some coaches. It's kind of interesting to go through these guys, and it's, get some names that you might remember from a little bit later or a little bit earlier. I think yeah, that's that Root is Charlie Root, the guy that gave up Babe Ruth's called shot. Right there. And I'm not sure if that's Chuck Klein or not, but it might be. Rudy York, Babe Herman, Sal Magley, Harry Burkeen, Wally Moses, Bob Lemon, Mel Harder, two pretty good pitchers for the Indians. Luke Appling, Hall of Famer with the White Sox. Bill Dickey, the Yankees. There's Charlie Crosetti. I'm not Charlie Crosetti. Frank Crosetti. Ralph Houck, the Major, and Eddie Lopat, or Eddie F. Lopat, if you believe Ted Williams. That's Mickey Vernon with the Pirates. Danny Osiak, later managed for the Phillies. This is just Johnny Keane replaced Solly Hamas as the St. Louis manager after the World Series in 1964 when the Yankees fired Yogi Berra and hired Johnny Keane for 1965. Johnny led the formerly great New York Yankees to a sixth place finish in 1965. Kind of fell out of favor at that time. That's Harry the Hat Walker. This is the guy responsible for Jim Cott's misspelled name. That's a thing to be famous for. Sam Mealy later managed the Minnesota Twins, which is the same franchise as the Washington Senators. There's Al Dart, third baseman for the Phillies. Lou Johnson later went on to the Los Angeles Dodgers and was one of their best hitters through their World Series championship team of 1965. Don Drysdale, obviously a Hall of Famer. Ned Garver was a 20-game winner with the St. Louis Browns. I think he was also might have been a 20-game loser once. Ken Boyer, not in the Hall of Fame, but was given very high consideration for it. Camilo Pascual, great Cuban pitcher for the Washington Senators and the uh, Minnesota Twins. Hall of Famer Yogi Berra. Frank Torre, brother of Joe Torre, Hall of Famer. And there's Frank Robinson again. We talked about him. Duke Snider, Hall of Famer. Norm Cash. Norm Cash in 1961 would hit 300 for the first and only time as a major league player when he hit 361 for the Detroit Tigers. Bill Verdon, the Deacon, center fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Hall of Famer Jim Bunning. Johnny Temple was the Reds' second baseman in the 1950s. Ted Kluszewski had been with the Cincinnati team in '59. He was with the Chicago White Sox with their pennant-winning team. Tommy Davis won back-to-back batting titles for the Dodgers, and unfortunately, the year after that, he broke his ankle. He never really came back from that injury. It bugged him till the end of his career. Tony Gonzalez achieved fame and fortune as the Phillies center fielder in the early and mid '60s. Stan Lopata was a catcher for the Phillies after Andy Seminick. Norm Sherry, catcher, his brother Larry Sherry, was a pitcher for the Dodgers and later a pitching coach. Clay Dalrymple, number 11, the number that is often given to catchers who are thereafter or up till then were known by their nickname Sticks. Sandy Amoros was one of the 1955 World Series heroes, caught the fading line drive off of Yogi Berra's. Yogi was almost a dead pull hitter, but he hits one ball to left field and Sandy Amoros catches it. Probably never hit another one. Mike Garcia, one of the 20-game winners for the Cleveland Indians. Whitey Lockman went on to 1962 to be the third base coach for the San Francisco Giants. Bob Aspromonte has a brother named Ken. And one of them was, maybe both of them ended up on the Houston Colt 45s when they became the Astros. Whichever one of them was still on the team was known as Aspro the Astro. Don Mincher was a big hitter in the Frank Howard mold for the Minnesota Twins. Here we got some all-stars here. Yeah, see Frank Malzone. He was the third all-star third baseman. Charlie Neal, all-star second baseman. Nellie Fox, all-star second baseman. Bill Skowron, first base. Willie McCovey, first base. Willie Mays, Al Kaline, Eddie Matthews, Luis Aparicio, Joe Cunningham, Roger Maris, Ernie Banks, shortstop, Mickey Mantle, Hank Aaron. I mean, 1, 2, 3 of the greatest outfielders ever. Roberto Clemente, Frank Robinson, 4th and 5th in that category. John Drysdale. We already talked about Camilo Pascual. John Antonelli, really at the end of his career. So that's my look at the. Here's one other card to show you, and that's this Mickey Mantle All-Star card. So I'm fortunate enough to have 2 of them. So I got this one graded, not because it's a high grade, because it's not, but because I had it, it was sitting in a box. And I thought, well, you might be used for trade bait sometime, maybe. I don't know. Probably not. Okay, so let's jump back up to this screen. And thank you for watching. If you're so inclined, it'd be wonderful if you could leave a comment. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm not really, actively trying to build more subscribers. I think I've been around long enough now where most people have probably at least heard of me if they're a vintage collector. And, I'm around still. So, anyway, this is Rocket Rick J, 18 at the launching pad, wishing that all your collecting dreams come true.